Hi, I'm Trey, and today we're going to talk about taking notes as part of your magical practice. This is going to be in two parts. In the first part, I'm going to talk about theory, sort of the why and the how and what the shape of good magical note taking looks like. And in the second part, I'm going to give an example that puts that theory into practice. One of the things I think we hear rather frequently, we being magical practitioners, particularly from practitioners who have been doing it for longer, is how critically important it is to take notes and to take good notes. And certainly that's true. I think everybody knows that if you don't record things well and you're not capturing details, then those experiences are sort of lost in a way. They're lost from your conscious mind at the very least. Why really is it so critically important? Being able to connect the dots of your experiences is a really critical piece of your practice. And what I mean by this is if you have an experience and you take notes about it, and maybe that experience doesn't make sense at the time that you have it, or maybe it's a minor detail of something else that you were doing. It's something that came up in a reading or as part of a meditation or as part of a ritual or something in vision. You record those notes and you record a lot of detail. And then later on, you have some other experience and you remember that that sounded a little bit like this other thing that I did. If you have good notes and you're able to go back and reference that and connect those dots, that is how this map of your experiences starts to grow. This connecting the dots is what makes magical note-taking different than a lot of other things. And we're going to talk about the shape of that and why, and literally what connect the dots actually looks like. Also, by taking good magical notes, you're able to not go back and have to relearn the same things over and over again. Early on in my magical practice, I did not take good notes. Some of the big experiences are well remembered and are built upon, but there was a lot of other things, I'm sure, that I've had to relearn because I didn't do a good job of capturing notes at the time. So being able to record your experiences, learn once from them, and then be able to build on them over time is a really key piece of this. Certainly that experience happens anyway, but you really accelerate it by having a good system of capturing your notes and being able to relate them to each other. I think it's also important to point out that the information that your notes captures is actually the fundamental piece of your practice. And it's this way that you build a foundation of knowledge. You build it and then you grow from it. So let's talk about the shape of magical notes. The information about a single topic should be stored in a single place. So, for example, if you are learning tarot, let's say, and you're doing readings and a particular card comes up and it has a different meaning in a particular context than you've seen it have before, or you have a new insight or revelation about the card, or maybe some imagery about the card pops out that you didn't notice before. When you have a note-taking system that allows you to keep all of the information about a single topic in that one topic and then reference it from someplace else, now you have this very powerful ability to say, in this reading, I had this card come up, and then reference the card. And then the new learning that you got about the card goes into the information that's relative to the card. So now later on, when you go and reference that card again, it's all in that same place. Hopefully this makes sense of why this is really important in the structure of your notes. So, some parts of magical note-taking are chronological. For example, taking notes about your daily meditation, or taking notes about, if, let's say that you do something on the full moon and on the new moon, being able to reference those things by date is important, obviously. However, there may have been an experience that you had as part of the thing that you were doing during a full moon, which relates to something else, and you need to be able to link those things up. And that other thing could have been something that happened 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago. It could have been something you looked up at some point in time. It could have been something that you were researching. Who knows? But it needs to be free form in a way that information is stored in one location and you're able to reference it. The organizational structure should not be dominated by any particular index. So whether it's time-based or whether it's topic-based or tag-based, you should have multiple different ways of building relationships between the pieces of information that you store. All right, let's talk a little bit more, go a little bit more deeply into what magic notes are and what they are not. So magic notes should be highly detailed. Being able to connect those dots only happens when you have specific details captured and are able to go back and reference those details at a later point in time, or when you have some other experience or whatever. The level of detail that you capture will be directly proportional to the value that you get out of the notes. So regardless of what system you end up using or how you end up going about it, the details are critically important. Your notes need to be referenceable. So this is not talking specifically about interlinking, as we were talking about in the last slide, and creating a web of knowledge. This is specifically about being able to find the information that are in your notes. If you do a reading and a topic comes up that has come up in the past, can you go back and find the notes from that prior reading? Can you do that quickly? Can you do that in a way that allows you to reference directly into those notes from the notes that you're taking about your current reading? Right? And it's about being able to find and get back into those notes. And then, are your notes accessible? This is a really, really big one. I'll give it a specific example of this in the context of dream journaling. If you are trying to record your dreams and you don't have immediate access at the point in time that you become conscious from dreaming, the detail of your dream will fade very quickly. I've had the experience where after waking up, I've gone to get a drink of water and then gone to my computer to take notes, and half of the dream is gone already. You literally need to be able to pick up your note capturing system while you're in bed, because it's stored right next to the bed, and be able to type in it instantly, or as close to instantly as possible. So that's what accessible means. Accessible also means that it's available to you wherever you are. If you are on vacation, if you're out hiking, whatever it is, your notes should be available to you, or you should have some way of being able to capture the details of an experience no matter where that experience occurs. Stuff happens all over the place. So are your notes accessible? Magic notes are not journaling. There's a lot of practices around journaling that you may have experience with, something like the artist's way or something along those lines. That's not what we're talking about here. Journaling is a way of processing something and kind of getting it out of your head. It's generally not something that you're going to go back and reference, and it certainly doesn't have the same kind of shape as creating a database of detailed experiences. It's not a diary, and I think the important thing here is that you're objectively capturing the information. You're not pouring your heart out onto the pages of Dear Diary. You are trying to, as objectively as possible, capture information. So it's just something to keep in mind. Objectivity is important when taking your magical notes, or being as objective as possible. They are also not class notes. You should be able to capture your notes, your study notes, in the same system and then be able to reference them in the same way. However, if you think about class notes, generally speaking, it's about getting the information into your head so that you can pass a test later. It's not necessarily about being able to build a database of experiences. So it's slightly different. There's some overlap, but it's slightly different. So as I said, this is a video in 2 parts, and we're coming to the end of part 1. That's mostly what I wanted to talk about on the theory side of things. Now I want to dive into a practical example. But I think it's also important to talk about why I picked this particular system and why I'm using it for this demonstration. You'll at least know what my decision-making process was in picking this particular thing. So the thing that I'm going to show is called Tiddlywiki, as you can see in the image. If you're familiar at all with MediaWiki or the Wikipedia, then you have a sort of idea of what it looks like. Tiddlywiki is a little bit different, but it's going to give you a good example of how building a map of experiences that are referenceable, what that can look like in software. It's free, so you don't have to pay a dime. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to use it here, so you can go and experiment with it. It's open source software, which I personally love, and it's very long-lived. It's been around for over 15 years. It's very stable and solid software. For the most part, all of your data in Tiddlywiki is stored within a single file. There is an exception to this, which is images and PDFs or other documents that you want to store, which it will let you do and reference. I'm not going to demonstrate how that actually works in Tiddlywiki, but I will point you to the documentation for it. So in that case, it's not technically a single file, but all of the data for the wiki is stored in a single file, which allows you to copy it to a thumb drive, back it up to a cloud provider, or whatever you want to do with it. And the data is yours. One of the reasons that I picked Tiddlywiki is to show how a system can give you control over your data. For me, that's an important thing. So finally, before we go into the example, I just want to say two more things. Pick a system. As I said, I'm going to demonstrate a particular system. You could pick that system. Maybe you already have something else that you like using. You can go with that. But pick a system and then spend enough time to get really good at using it, whatever that system is. Learn all of the hotkeys. Learn all of the syntax. Learn how to use every feature that it provides. Get so good with it that it's completely natural to use. It's comfortable. It makes perfect sense to you. You can get in, capture the information that you want to capture as quickly as possible, and it just feels comfortable and good and like a trusted resource. You can't get to that level of connection with your note-taking system unless you really dive into it and spend some time with it. I'm not technical, quote unquote, is not an excuse to not dive in on a system. If it feels like you're struggling against the system, find a different one. But once you have worked out the thing that you're going to use, stick with it and get real good at it. All right, on to the second part. So I'm going to give a specific example, as I said, and the example that we're going to use is a piece of software called Tiddlywiki, as I already said. I don't know why I'm repeating myself. But before we get into using Tiddlywiki, there's one thing that you need to do in your browser in order to make Tiddlywiki work. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go into the browser settings. On the Mac, that's Command, comma. If you want to find it via the menu, you can click on the little hamburger menu and go to Preferences. And inside of Settings, you want to search for the word Save. And when you do, the top item in the list will be an item that says Downloads. The default value here is to save files to the download folder. You want to switch that to always ask where to save files. And this will become apparent when we try to save Tiddlywiki. You need to set this to on or you won't be able to save within Tiddlywiki. So that's the first thing. After we've done that, we simply go to the Tiddlywiki website. And if you scroll down a little bit, there's a button here that says Download Empty. So we're going to click on that button. And this is going to bring up an option to save the file. And you can see that it's a single HTML file. Earlier when I was saying that Tiddlywiki is a single file, this is what I was talking about. So we're going to save the file. I'm just going to save it to the desktop, and I'm going to call it just Magic Notes to make it super easy. All right, that's it. Okay, so now that we've saved it, we're going to go to the desktop, and we're going to open it up. This is what a empty default Tiddlywiki looks like. You can change the title. There's many options that you can set within the application. Some of them, I'm going to go over a couple, but not very many. But there are a few things that you want to do right out of the gate. You want to click on this little settings cog. And under settings, you want to go to appearance, and then you want to go to story view, and you want to select zoom in. This is going to make it so that we only have one, what's called a tiddler, or one card. Looking back at the web-like shape of how you want to take your notes, each one of these cards is like one node in that web. So this will allow us to focus on one node at a time. Later on, when you get better with the software, you can try some of these other modes. Next, we're going to go to Theme Tweaks. And this very top option, which says Sidebar Layout, we're going to change it from Fixed Story Fluid Sidebar to Fluid Story Fixed Sidebar, which is going to give us more real estate for the individual tiddler that we're working on. Lastly, we're going to go to the Settings tab, and we're going to scroll down a little bit to where it says Editor Toolbar. And we're going to uncheck the Show Editor Toolbar option. Part of the reason why we want to uncheck the Show Editor Toolbar is because wikis have a way of writing text that allows you to create formatting as you write the text. This editor toolbar will make it easy to click a button and change that editing. But as I was saying before, getting really good with the tool that you're going to use to capture your notes is really critical. And unchecking this checkbox, you will have to learn how to write wiki text. And I'll give an example of what this looks like and point you at the documentation, but uncheck this, take the training wheels off, and learn how to do it the right way. All right, now that we've gotten the settings out of the way, there's one more thing that I want to turn on. On the right-hand side, underneath the search box, there's a tab called Tools. And right underneath the New Tiddler checkbox is another checkbox that says New Journal. We're gonna just tick that box, and then you can see that there's now a Create New Journal and also a Create New Empty Tiddler. And the reason that we're going to do that is because we're going to create one of each as an example. As I said before, you don't want your notes to be purely organized by chronology, but this gives you a way of creating notes which are based on a particular date, and then to be able to link those up to other things. So first, let's create a journal entry. This creates a new tiddler, and you can see that it's already populated the date in the title of the tiddler. The title of the tiddler is important because this is how you will link to the tiddler later. So we'll capture some notes. This exclamation point says that this is a heading. By clicking this checkbox, I can confirm the changes, and then we can see my meditation notes. You can see that meditation is a heading, and the rest of the text is presented as normal text. Now let's say that later on that same day, I also do a reading. I could capture that here as well. So there we have a very simple single journal entry. Let's do something a little bit more interesting and complicated. So let's look at how we create and link things together. So let's say that I'm learning tarot. I'm going to create a tarot tiddler, and this is going to be the entry point or an index into my notes on tarot cards. And I'm going to give it some content here. I'm going to say 0 is the Fool, 1 the Magician. That's good enough. Just need an example here. In this case, I'll have a bulleted list starting with the major arcana. I'm not going to go through everything. This is just as an example. You can see how the bulleted list appears. I'm going to go back in and edit this. This is what you would do in a top-down type note-taking system, is you might put some notes in here, and then later on, you might have some other notes about the Fool captured elsewhere, etc. But as I said, we don't want to do that. We want to capture all of our notes about the Fool card or any other specific topic in one place. So the way that you do that in Diddlywiki is you surround that item in double square brackets. This says I want to link to a thing that is titled whatever is inside of the brackets. I'm going to go ahead and do this with the Magician as well. And now when I save this tiddler, you can see that the text of these links is in blue and it's italicized. This is Diddlywiki's way of saying that this is a link to another item, to another tiddler. However, when it's in italics, that means it doesn't yet exist. But you could still click on it, and then it will create the tiddler for you. So I can simply go in and edit this. and start capturing my notes about the Fool card. Now that this exists, if I go back to my tarot entry, you can see that the Fool is now no longer italicized. And if I click on it, it takes me directly to my notes. Now, let's go back to our journal entry. I clicked on a link in the this is Tiddlers that were recently opened. I could also have searched for it. So any text that you want to search for, you can just type into the search box and then click on an item to open it up. So now that we have our journal entry open again, I'm going to edit it. And let's say that in this reading, one of the cards that came up was the Fool. Now, if I save this entry, I might have a bunch of notes here about the specific reading, what my interpretation of the reading was. However, anything that I learned about the Fool card, I can now store here within the Fool card in a single place. Oops. So this is the same Tiddler no matter which direction I come from, no matter which direction I'm getting to it from. So the Fool, I can click on the Fool from my journal entry, or I can go to my top level tarot item and click on the Fool. It's the same thing. So hopefully that starts to show how powerful this system can be. I could also have a top level index, or maybe I have I'll just call it index 2020. And I could in here have an index of meditation notes and maybe readings. So if I come here and then I go back to my journal entry, I can copy the title of my journal entry. I can go back to my index, put that in here, and again, put double square brackets around it to create a link. And now I can link directly to that journal entry's notes. And if I wanted to have my index also have notes about readings, I could also put that here. I could put that same thing, or maybe I could say, say tarot notes. And then in this case, we just have the entry pointed to the tarot. And then when we click on that, we go to our list here, etc. You can see how we can move around our database of information and link things up and move between those links. And you can even know that you want to capture information about something but not know what it is yet, and create a link within double brackets and simply don't fill that in yet. Maybe you come back and fill that in later. There's one more thing that I want to show here on the going back to our control panel by clicking on the cog. In the info panel, which you might have seen at the very beginning, one of the settings that's listed here is default Tiddlers. And these are Tiddlers which are displayed at startup. So if we wanted to start with our index, we could list that here. But in order to do that, we also need to save. Saving Diddlywiki is as simple as clicking on this red button. When you make changes, this button will turn red. So you click on this Save Changes button, and it'll pop up the browser's file save dialog. We're going to save the file, and we're going to give it the same name. We're just not going to change it. It's saved to the desktop as Magic Notes. And this is going to replace the file that we opened. And this is what we want to do. We've now replaced the file with the file that contains the new data. And you can see that the save button is now grayed out because we haven't made any new changes. I'm going to go ahead and close Firefox and then reopen our wiki. And there you have it. It starts out on the index and we're good to go. So hopefully that gives you a good practical example of applying the stuff that we talked about in the first part of the video. If you want to know more about Tiddlywiki, all of the documentation is on the website at tiddlywiki.com. It's tiddlywiki.com. And there are guides and tutorial videos. As I said, this has been around for a very long time, so there's lots of documentation. You can dive in there. One of the things that you will definitely want to look at sooner rather than later is how you link to other content outside of your Tiddlywiki. I don't want to dive into that in this example because I want to keep it a little bit brief, but that's how you get started. You can dive on this in a lot more detail. If you have any questions or want to contact me, my contact information is stored with the video. You can find me at hallofdoors.com, and all of my contact information is there, plus other projects that I work on. So good luck, and I'll talk to you soon.